nurtured. So the only alternative we're left with to destroy the soil. So madness gives birth to madness. And suicide in any way, in religious terms, is absolutely forbidden. In Islam, suicide is forbidden to the extent that even it is preferred not to say the janazah prayer of anyone who has committed suicide. So many a time they are buried without any religious ceremonies. The principle involved in that is that while you live, you can seek forgiveness for the sins you have committed before your last breath. But if you commit suicide, suicide is that last crime against God which you could not seek forgiveness for, because it kills you at the instant you commit that crime. So it leaves to God, everything is left to God. Whether He shows mercy on such people or not is His department. We don't have any way to interfere and find out what He will. I don't mean to say that such people who have committed suicide will all go to hell. Some of them have some compulsions from within, some are mad, some have some other problems which humans cannot judge. But as a whole, suicidal tendencies are madness. Now, when they are individual madness, even then the society does not permit them to happen. But when they become communal madness, then the suffering they cause is directly proportional to that. And I fully condemn all attempts of suicide, whether at individual level or at a communal level. Thank you.
The next question is Mr. D. Wallace from Coventry.
Mr. Wallace doesn't seem to be present here. Or I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Read it nice and loud.
Okay. Your Holiness. Right, my question is as follows. We see in the world a lot of suffering. A great deal of it is caused by man. But if God had not created the world, there wouldn't be any suffering. Now my question is quite simple. What is the point of creation?
Okay.
And how can the people who suffer be convinced that God exists?
Thank you. Please sit down. The issue of suffering is a time-old dilemma faced by man, particularly by moralists, by the leaders of religion, etc. What is the philosophy of suffering? Why should God, if He is, all merciful and all forgiving, why should He create suffering at all? This issue has been debated among the philosophers, among the religious leaders, various religions and their founders from times immemorial, as far as I can reach. The one philosophy which was offered by Zoroaster seemed to be a mechanical and simple answer to that. He believed, not he, but some of his followers later on, not he himself, believed that there are two gods. One is of evil and one is of goodness. And they go on playing a seesaw between them. Sometimes the hand of the evil god is transcendent and above and becomes stronger. And sometimes the hand of the good God, or God of goodness, becomes powerful and gains the upper hand. This is a philosophy, but in fact a childish attempt to resolve the issue. Because that means there is no hope at all. There is no evolution. there is no set direction towards betterment of our affairs, because if this is just an accidental thing, then it can go on and on forever. But apart from this Zoroastrian philosophy, which is, I believe, wrongly understood by some philosophers of later ages, all other divinely revealed scriptures speak of only one God, and He is the God of goodness, and there is no evil created by Him. So what is suffering then? How is it born? If you understand this philosophy correctly, then automatically the issue of evil will be resolved. Because, you know, sun sends radiation down to earth, and the whole universe around the sun is illuminated by the radiation of the sun. Whichever is closer is more radiant, which is farther away is less radiant, but the sun is the source of light. Who created shadows? Who created darkness? None. It is the lack of light which creates shadows and darkness. Night in itself is not a positive value. It is a pole, an opposite pole of light which cannot be done away with. Anyone can choose to move from light to shadow or to darkness. So this choice is that of the person, if he is given this option. If he makes the wrong decisions and opts for darkness instead of light, how can that God be blamed for this, who created the sun for the purpose of enlightening? Now I'm talking in general metaphors, and they should not be applied in every detail, because the night also has its values. The Holy Quran speaks of that very clearly, that night is also essential for you. But when you symbolize these things, then light means goodness and evil means, darkness means evil. Happiness can be likened unto light, and misery and sorrow and suffering can be likened unto darkness. So is this illustration applicable to the human experience or not? This is the second point which I want to clarify. I believe it is applicable, because man's reluctance to accept the divine instruction most often creates evil for him himself. Like man's defiance of medical advice can create evil for him, which is of his own doing. Now the issue is spread over not only one generation, but generation after generation. There are some collective effects as well, which are created by our forefathers, and we cannot run away from them, yet we share the sufferings despite the fact that they were not of our own doing. So these issues become more complex when you reach this stage of resolving them, because then another issue will evolve as to why should a generation suffer for crimes or omissions for which its forefathers were responsible, not that generation. I have taken up this issue, and I have attempted to resolve it from all various angles. In a recently finished work on the question of revelation, knowledge, wisdom, etc., where I feel you can find many answers to this question which have many-sidedness. And I have tried to explain the philosophy of creation, and I have tried to establish established that in the philosophy of creation,